Introduction to the digestive system. So the digestive system has a lot of anatomy, and as we move down the alimentary canal, which is the passageway from the mouth all the way to the anus, and we get to each individual organ, I'm going to tell you the functions of the organ. So it's a lot of anatomy. Let's start from the top. Okay, so we have the hard palate, which has bone, and then behind that the soft palate, which is just soft tissue, so there's no bone right here, and then the uvula, which is just this little hanging down structure, and it seems to have really no purpose, and it is something that we might have used in our evolutionary past, but we are no longer using today. So that is going to be one of those vestigial structures that we talked about on a previous video. Vestigial. Now let's see if you can remember what is the name of this structure, number 5. That was also from a previous video. Okay, now on the half head model, we have the hard palate. You can see that there's actual bone that making up the hard palate, the roof of the mouth. And then you have the soft palate, which is like smooth muscle and just tissue, and then the hanging down part, which is the uvula. Now the soft palate, this is what we push the food up against the soft palate whenever we're going to swallow, and that soft palate closes this passageway when you swallow, so food doesn't go up the wrong direction. It's supposed to go down to your stomach. Then we have 3 pairs of salivary glands. So here on the side of the cheek there is the parotid salivary gland. It's a very large salivary gland, and then there's this duct that secretes the saliva into the buccal cavity. And the submandibular or submaxillary salivary gland has the duct that secretes the saliva just under the tongue. And then the sublingual salivary gland is underneath the tongue, and there's a whole bunch of little ducts that secrete the saliva again up under the tongue. Now this is Tommy's head, and you can see one of the glands here on the side of his face and another one here. So pause the video, answer these questions, and then I will give you the answers. So this one, it's going to be parotid salivary gland. If you just said parotid gland, that's not specific enough. Like, you need to tell me the whole name. Don't just say parotid. Say parotid salivary gland. And for 39, you should have said submandibular salivary gland, or you should have said submaxillary salivary gland. And then it says name the type of glands that secrete through a duct. Those are exocrine glands. Okay, for this slide also it's a review. Pause the video and answer these questions. Okay, next we have this passageway. This entire passageway is the pharynx, commonly referred to as the throat. It is a 5-inch passageway that carries air and food and water, but it's divided into 3 parts. So behind the nose, this passageway is the nasopharynx, behind the mouth, the oropharynx, and behind the larynx, the laryngopharynx or laryngeal pharynx. So all of it together is just the pharynx. And I had mentioned in a previous video that if that were to get infected and you have a throat infection, that is called pharyngitis. So you have the pharynx. Then below that is the esophagus. So this is the opening to the esophagus right here that's going to take the food down to the stomach. And this organ, this structure, this entire structure here is the larynx, which is your voice box. Now let's see if you can name the structure. Number 1. Give the name of the structure number 2. And give the name of this structure number 3. Okay, so moving down the alimentary canal, you have the esophagus that is 12 inches and it takes the food down to the stomach. So right here, number 8 is your stomach. From there, it's going to move from the stomach to the small intestines. And all of this tan-colored organ here is the small intestines. From there, it moves to the large intestines, which is all this, I don't know what color that is, purple, gray organ here is all of this is the large intestines. Okay, our other guts include the liver, which is the largest organ inside the body. And beneath the liver, you have the gallbladder. And this little sliver of an organ, which is behind the stomach, is the pancreas. And hanging here, the vermiform appendix. Okay, let's start with the stomach. So the stomach, I want you to know all these parts of the stomach. The top part of the stomach is called the fundus. The middle part is the body. And this bottom part of the stomach is the pylorus. And this curve is the lesser curvature of the stomach, while this one is the greater curvature of the stomach. And the job of the stomach, the main job, it has many jobs, but for this first test, I just want you to know the main job of the stomach is to mix the food with the acid and to turn it into chyme. Also on this model, we have this duodenum right here, the little first part of the duodenum. So once the food, it's mixed up, the stomach has mixed the food up with the acid, turned into the chyme, it's going to dump it then into the duodenum, which is the first part of the small intestines. And the gallbladder will secrete bile also into the duodenum. Okay, so the small intestines is all of this organ here. It's 11, 13, and 14. And it's 23 to 25 feet long. And it's divided into 3 parts. So this first part is the duodenum. And it's only 9 inches. And it's the most important part right there is where everything comes in from the stomach, from the gallbladder, from the liver, from the pancreas. Everything comes into the duodenum. So that's like the very most important part. And what's happening there is just kind of collecting all this different stuff. And mostly what's happening there, I want to say like 100%, it's just kind of like everything convenes into the duodenum and it's going to just start digestion. So the digestion actually occurs in the small intestines. And then as it gets digested down to the basic building blocks, then they get absorbed from the intestines, and then it'll move its way into a capillary or a lymphatic capillary if it's fat, so it'll get absorbed into your blood. So the small intestines, that is really, there's two things that happen in the small intestines: digestion and absorption, the absorption of the nutrients. It has to be, these foods have to be digested down to the basic building block. So the duodenum is going to be almost like 100% digestion. I mean, there is absorption if you ingested the food already in the basic building block form. And then the jejunum. So this is going to be like 10 feet of small intestines here, and you're going to have both digestion, absorption, and then the last part of the small intestines is like 12 feet or 10 to 12 feet, the ileum. And again, it's a combination of digestion, absorption, but you're going to have a lot of absorption because by this point it should be fully digested. So this is like 25 feet long. By the time you get to the ileum, it should be digested. And so therefore there's going to be a lot of absorption. Next we have the large intestines, which is commonly referred to as the colon. Like if you get a colonoscopy, they're looking at the inside of the large intestines. Now why is it called the large intestines? Because large intestines is only 5 feet long, and while the small intestines is like 23, 25 feet long. So why is it called the large intestines? That is because it is larger in diameter. So while the small intestines has a small little diameter, the large intestines has a larger diameter. And the job of the large intestines, as it's moving through this 5 feet, the job is to absorb water and electrolytes to solidify the feces. So we said that, you know, by the time it gets to the ileum, it should be fully digested, and then it's just absorption, 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 all those nutrients. So what's left after 25 feet of small intestines is just solid waste. That it's fiber, it's things that we cannot get nutrients from. So that solid waste moves into this large intestines, and it starts right here. This pocket structure is called the cecum, and then it's going to move up the ascending colon, across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, and then it's going to make like an S shape, a curve, which is the sigmoid colon, and then finally it moves into the rectum. So when it first enters the large intestines in the cecum, it's still water, it's still a liquid, but as it moves through the large intestines, the job is to just absorb water and electrolytes, water and electrolytes, water and electrolytes, absorb, 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 to solidify the feces. Also, we have the vermiform appendix. Vermiform means worm-like. It looks like a little worm. It is here. It is hanging actually from the cecum. And let me ask you right now before we move on, this is one of those organs that it no longer has any benefit. It may be something that we used in our evolutionary past, but is no longer beneficial or helpful today. What is the name of those structures that are in the human body that were important possibly in our evolutionary past, but no longer important today? So you should have said vestigial. Okay, this is a true vestigial structure. Why do we have it? Well, perhaps it is something that's left over that may have been useful in digestion. The birds have an appendix, and they actually use their appendix. Okay, so birds have a very short small intestines that is not 25 feet long, but they eat things that take a long time to digest. They eat seeds and nuts. And so if it gets through the small intestines and it's not completely digested, they'll put their food, the seed, into this vermiform appendix or appendix, and it will continue to be digested. But for us, if it hasn't been digested after going through that entire small intestine, it's not going to be digested. So the body will still, the system will still put this stuff that is waste, that can't be digested, into the appendix. So things like gum, things that so it goes to the cecum, and the cecum says, oh wait, this can still be digested, or it thinks it can still be digested, but it can't. And then it puts it into another thing that goes in there is fingernails. You know how kids, when they're little, they'll eat their fingernails, like swallow them? They'll get stuck down there in that vermiform appendix. And so like when you eat popcorn, there's kind of like this little shell of the corn that gets stuck in there. So stuff that it's fiber, it can't be digested, maybe watermelon seeds. And so it becomes a place for infection. You get appendicitis, and if the appendix were to rupture, it's like spreads this toxins throughout the whole body, and you have like a shock, toxic shocks so it's just a really bad. It's not beneficial. It's actually causes more harm than good. And that's hanging from the cecum. Okay, who does remember? Let's see if you remember this organ B. Name the organ B, and also tell me which organ system does it belong to? Okay, what is this organ here? This organ right here, the sliver of an organ, that's going to be the pancreas. And this right here is this 9 inches, and it's shaped like a C. And we have the upper arm, this is of the duodenum, and the lower arm of the duodenum. So this is the duodenum. And the pancreas, we have the head, the body, and the tail of the pancreas. So this is considered the romance of the gut. The head of the pancreas lies in the arms of the duodenum. And this is that area that I was telling you is like the most important place in the entire digestive system, because this is where everything happens. This is where the stomach is dumping the chyme into the duodenum right here. Pancreas is dumping digestive enzymes into the duodenum. And the gallbladder and liver are dumping bile into the duodenum. So everything happens right here in the romance of the gut. So this is like this famous location. And where is it? It is epigastric. So it is right there, like right at the bottom of your sternum. And that's where everything happens right there. You got the chyme, so the pancreas, what it does for the digestive system, because you remember that the pancreas belongs to two systems. It belongs to the endocrine system and the digestive system. And for the endocrine system, he helps to regulate blood sugar. For the digestive system, it dumps digestive enzymes and bicarbonate ions into the duodenum. So it's dumping all this stuff that's really important and necessary for digestion. It dumps it into the duodenum. So the bicarbonate ions help neutralize the acid, digestive enzymes to help digest the food. Then you have this duodenum here. Okay, this is another model I have of the guts. This is Tommy's guts. So all of this creamy colored organ here is going to be, all of it is the small intestines. All of this. And the first, all this part is going to be the jejunum. The duodenum is this little bitty 9 inches that's up here. So all of this here is the jejunum, and all of this down here is the ileum. Because remember, the small intestine is divided into 3 parts: the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum. And then we have the large intestine, which is this gray organ, starting with the cecum, which is a pocket-like structure. Then you're going to go moving up the ascending colon, across the transverse colon, and then down back here we have descending colon, and then sigmoid colon. And looking at the back of that model of the guts, let's see if you can name them before I tell you what they are. So give the name of the organ A, and give the name of this organ part B. And what is the name of this structure C? I taught that on a previous video. So A is the vermiform appendix. B is this pocket structure, the beginning of the large intestines, or colon, which is the cecum. And C is that double fold of peritoneum, which is the mesentery. And that is holding all your guts in place, and it's helping provide like a very supportive, strong structure for arteries, veins, and nerves. What is that organ? So this ginormous organ, largest organ in the body, that's going to be the liver. And it has 4 functions. Now, the liver is a vital organ. You cannot live without the liver. Okay, you cannot live without the liver. So let's talk about the four functions of the liver. It is a manufacturing plant. A manufacturing plant means that it like makes things. It makes clotting factors, okay, needed for clotting. It makes these carrier proteins, these globulins that carry things in the blood, and it makes bile, which is needed to help digest fat, to emulsify the fat. Those are just some of the things that I was just giving you some examples of what the liver makes. But the liver is a manufacturing plant, and it makes a lot of stuff. It is also a processing plant. So all of those newly absorbed nutrients from the small intestines get transported first to the liver to be processed before going to all the rest of the cells. Everything, all the nutrients, everything goes to the liver to be processed except for fat. Fat just goes into the lymphatic vessel, up that thoracic duct, and directly into the blood. But all the other nutrients go first to the liver to be processed before going to the rest of the cells. It is also a detoxifying and recycling center. So you know that the liver is responsible for detoxifying alcohol. Like if you are drinking that alcohol that is ingested, it gets absorbed and goes to the liver, and the liver tries its very best to detoxify it. But drugs that you ingest, poisons, the liver is part of its processing. It's also detoxifying poisons. And it can recycle. It's a recycling center. So dead red blood cells only have a very short life of 120 days, and they're constantly dying, and they get trapped by the liver, and the liver breaks down those dead red blood cells and recycles the different parts of those dead red blood cells. And another job of the liver is it is just a storehouse. It stores vitamins, it stores red blood cells, it stores platelets. So the liver has these 4 vital functions, super important, and you cannot live without the liver. Now the gallbladder, on the other hand, that's just a little bitty sac on the back, from the back of the liver. It's not a vital organ. You can live without the gallbladder. It's nice to have, though. It concentrates the bile and it constricts the bile into the duodenum. So bile, it just stores the bile, concentrates it, and dumps it into the duodenum. Now, if you don't have the gallbladder, the liver does this. The liver dumps bile into the duodenum. So you do not have to have the gallbladder. All right. I want you to pause this video and see if you can answer all of these, name all of these organs. So we need to review all of this. I think all the rest of the slides are review slides. So I'm going to click on the slide, and you're going to pause it and review those parts and see if you can name them. For this one, the entire passageway, 1, 2, and 3, so that's just going to be the pharynx. But then what is it called just right here? What is the specific name of it just right here? And what is the specific name of it just right here? There is always a clue in the questions. And name the organ. Name the organ part, the part of the organ. You know, name the area. So it's always a clue in the question. Now, for the lab practical, when you enter the exam assessment room, it's just me and you, live video. So I see your video of your face, you see my face. But I can show you a picture of a model. And for the most part, it's going to be these models that I'm showing you in the videos. But you should also be able to identify, I don't have to use these pictures of these models. So if I were to suddenly have another picture of the digestive system, kind of like this one, I didn't really go over that one. So if I suddenly like pop up a new picture, a new model that I haven't, I didn't go over it, you should still be able to identify those organs. Okay, so this is that whole concept of applying what you've learned. So if you can figure out that this is the liver, then you would know that this is the gallbladder, and that's going to be the duodenum. So this is the pancreas, is the head of the pancreas. It's going to be the romance of the gut right here. That's the bile duct. The gallbladder is dumping bile and the liver too into the duodenum. And then from the duodenum you have the next part of the small intestine, which is the jejunum. And this organ, which is also behind the stomach, so the stomach would be sitting here on top, so that's going to be the spleen. So you should be able to figure this out. So I'm saying is, I'm going to be using these pictures and asking you from these models that I'm presenting to you in the video in the lab practical. I'm going to say, you know, what's the name of that organ? What's the name of that organ part? Be specific. In that, what organ system does it belong to? Just like I am in the video, but I might show you a picture of a model that you've never seen before. And I expect you to be able to apply your knowledge from the models that I presented and be able to figure it out. And that is it for the digestive system.